Coming up on Lawmakers. The House begins to look at redrawing district maps in accordance with a federal court order. The Senate passes a controversial abortion measure after more than an hour of debate. And the resolution that would effectively ban gay marriage in Georgia clears its last Senate committee. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Thursday, February 12th. Here are your hosts, Wendy Lawson and Gerald Bryant.
Good evening, everyone. Also on tonight's broadcast, the House passes a controversial payday lending bill.
And the House rejects a conference committee compromise on water. But our top story tonight, reapportionment.
Secretary of State Cathy Cox says Democratic legislators want Attorney General Thurbert to appeal the federal court decision overturning the state House and Senate districts. In a letter dated today, Cox tells Baker that she's consulted with the legislative leaders who designed the plans. The letter continues, quote, "In my discussions with them yesterday, the Democratic leaders expressed their intention to move forward with drawing a new plan for the House, as the court directed. They also were hopeful that you would institute an appeal," end quote. Secretary of State Cox is a defendant in the redistricting case because she administers the state election laws. Also today, House Majority Leader Jimmy Skipper said plans would proceed with drawing new House and Senate maps.
We are going to do what we can through the House Reapportionment Committee to comply with the court order directing that the House and the Senate begin again working on reapportionment.
Two redistricting plans have been introduced. They can provide a framework to redraw maps and try to meet the March 1st deadline imposed by Tuesday's U.S. District Court ruling.
Meanwhile, the House Appropriations Committee, or Reapportionment Committee rather, turned to Deputy Attorney General Dennis Dunn this afternoon for clarification about how to comply with the redistricting order. Dunn told the committee that federal courts will require them to adhere to the one-man, one-vote principle, except in areas where there is a precedent for deviating from that rule. These include seeking compact districts, protecting city or county lines, and maintaining court districts. Dunn told the committee that the court decision was based in part on the political process for redistricting.
The court said, now why did that deviation occur? And part of what we said was there was obviously politics involved. I know you'd be shocked to find out that politics is involved in the reapportionment process. Part of what was involved is what has been a very long-standing and historic tension, I think, between urban and rural Georgia, and how to deal with population growth in some areas and not in others. And part of it was, again, there was this political aspect where some incumbents were protected and other incumbents were not.
Mr. Dunn also pointed out that some key deadlines are looming. Candidates need to know what district they represent in order to qualify for election between April 26th and April 30th. The primary election is July 20th, and the Secretary of State's office will have to distribute absentee ballots for the November general election by September 5th. The committee was told that these deadlines would be difficult for election officials to meet.
There is great potential for things to go wrong. I don't know if you all have seen this, but you know, in the election process, things rarely run smoothly, and things rarely run on the theoretical timeline. So there may be some real practical problems that prevent them from being able to do this on the timeline. But they're currently doing the work for the primary now. They're currently putting together ballot styles and combinations and things like that. Some of that work may just, you know, if you adopt new plans or the court imposes new plans, may be out the window and they need to start all over again.
The House Reapportionment Committee took no action today. Committee members and other legislators are allowed to submit plans, and the committee will meet to discuss them next week.
Today's developments follow that federal district court decision on Tuesday, which said that current House and Senate districts violate the one-man, one-vote standard. The court ruling prompted Governor Sonny Perdue to send a letter to the Secretary of State, Cathy Cox, and to Attorney General Thurbert. That letter says in part, quote, "We're writing to exhort you to bring finality to Georgia's redistricting process by not appealing this decision. We hope that you will both agree to end this abuse of taxpayer dollars," end quote. Governor Perdue also called for an end to appeals in a Wednesday news conference.
But I'm calling upon both of them to drop this silly appeal or any further waste of state taxpayers' dollars. The comments, if you read the the unanimous opinion of those judges, they get it. They know what happened, they know why it happened, and they said it is wrong. These three judges, comprised of Democratically and Republican appointed judges, they have not convicted us of going 60 in a 55 zone. They have convicted us very convincingly of driving under the influence of partisan political power. And that's what we must correct. And the fact of the matter is, I hope that my colleagues on the other side will see it that way.
When asked if a special session would be necessary, the governor says he sees no reason why new House and Senate maps could not be ready by the March 1st deadline.
In other news, the state Senate today voted to close a loophole in the law regulating abortions for minors. Senate Bill 240 limits who can give permission and requires proof of guardianship.
And what we're doing is taking out the words person standing in loco parentis, which means that person that is standing there with the teenage girl and say they're filling in for the parent. And this is a hole in the law that's wide enough to drive any truck through.
Hudgens said the bill would keep boyfriends of minor girls from posing as guardians and granting permission for abortions. Here's what some opponents had to say.
In this country, women have a right to choose. It's a constitutional right. I recognize that there are people in this chamber who don't like that. But as long as we have that, we should be looking to pass laws that are consistent with that constitutional right.
You continue to want to tell people how to run their lives, how to live their lives, what they can do and what they can't do, and then you are the very people in this body that's hurting 27,000 to 28,000 people that's on Medicaid. You're hurting child care.
There's a law in place on notification. You know, time out. Leave the women alone. We can take care of ourselves. We do not need you to take care of us.
And Senator Nadine Thomas suggested that Senator Hudgens, a primary sponsor of the bill, should pay more attention to men's health issues.
Only women get abortions, and so that's the only place that we could have legislation regarding abortion. And I am not preventing a single abortion. I am just making sure that this young lady that is presenting herself for this psychologically damaging procedure, that she is doing it with the consent of her parents or her guardian or from the court.
Senate Bill 240 passed 42 to 13 and goes to the House.
Well, the House and Senate continue to disagree about how to tackle the state's water management problems. The House today voted to reject a conference committee report for House Bill 237, a measure to direct water conservation issues from the Environmental Protection Division to a water council and then on to the Department of Natural Resources. Although the Natural Resources Committee chair initially signed onto the report, Representative Bob Hanner now says he erred. He urged his colleagues to require that legislative oversight and other management criteria be returned to House Bill 237.
I don't see any protection at all in this bill against transfers from one river basin to the other. I realize what you're doing is just creating a group, but I become very concerned when I see no language that would protect against those transfers. Also, isn't it true I see no language that would prohibit trading of water permits? And then I guess what concerns me more than anything else, Mr. Hanner, is that on page 4, lines 27, when the report is subsequently brought back to the Board of Natural Resources, they only have an option of voting it up or down, similar to what we do on conference committees. There's no option for them to address the content in any way except to either reject it or approve it. Am I correct in that?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. And let me say, there is nothing in here on interbasin transfers. There's nothing in here on permit transfers. The decision that was made was to come back with a planning act only.
With no dissenting votes, the House voted to disagree with the conference committee for House Bill 237. The Senate agreed to that report back on February 5th, so a conference committee will now have to reconsider the matter.
Legislation to make any marriage not between a man and woman unconstitutional in Georgia passed the Senate Rules Committee yesterday, but not before those against Senate Resolution 595 voiced their opinions. David Zelski joins us live from the Capitol with more. David.
Well, that's right, Gerald. Those protesting the resolution held their second Capitol rally on Tuesday, knowing the decision in Senate Rules was one day away. But the ending vote in committee on Wednesday was almost unanimously in favor of the resolution. Several people against Senate Resolution 595 came to the Capitol Tuesday to make their voices heard.
We are under attack this year like we have never been before.
I think that the senators that are promoting this like the attention, and it's unfortunate to me that they would waste the time of the Senate on something that's so divisive as this.
Then on Wednesday, Senator Mike Crotts, who sponsors Senate Resolution 595, introduced it to the committee.
It is a continuing problem, not by someone's lifestyle, but by our activist judges all over this country that are taking their personal views and points and making changes in and crossing over into the legislative process to pass laws that we legislate because they don't like them.
The resolution passed overwhelmingly, regardless of several testimonies against it. Senator Nadine Thomas, the only committee member who opposed.
We do not need to put this on the ballot. It has already been defined. And once we start eroding the Constitution, then there are going to be other rights that are going to be taken away from people.
Now, in order for the resolution to become part of Georgia's Constitution, it still must receive a two-thirds vote in the Senate, a two-thirds vote in the House, and finally receive a majority vote from the people in November's elections. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
David, a question. Did the committee say when Senate Resolution 595 is expected on the Senate floor?
Well, unless things change, it's expected on Tuesday.
Thank you very much, David. Meanwhile, Senate Bill 298 increases the waiting period to get a divorce in Georgia. That measure passed the Senate today. Here's Senator Mitch Seabaugh.
This bill will not heal every broken marriage, but the statistics will bear out that a longer waiting period can have a direct correlation to lower divorce rates, and if we save even one marriage, keep one family intact, where the children of that family are saved from prison or poverty, I believe it is well worth it.
Among opponents to the bill, Senator Seth Harp, a divorce attorney who says there are no quickie divorces in Georgia now. Here's a sample of those opposed to the bill.
The only way in Georgia that you have the short waiting period is if the person who has filed a divorce, if it is truly uncontested and the other party makes no objection to it.
Here we are again. Government being involved in your lives. From the cradle to the grave.
What really bothers me is that the party, the Republican Party, who are always saying that at the top of the agenda is less government intervention, would present some legislation like this.
If you keep people together longer, my 25 years of experience says you don't aid the process, you aggravate the process.
Senator Seabaugh, who had quoted statistics from other states where he said longer waiting periods equal fewer divorces, defended his bill.
This bill doesn't make anybody stay together. If they file a divorce and they are living separate, it provides a cooling off period. If there is a woman in a domestic violence situation, it provides her an out under no-fault divorce for no waiting period. It improves the situation for a young lady that is in a domestic violence situation.
Senate Bill 298 passed 32 to 21 with amendments and heads to the House.
Well, today the House passed Senate Bill 157, also known as the Payday Lending Bill. That measure would restrict lending agencies that offer high-interest loans and short-term loans. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman is live with more. Jesse.
Well, in Wandy, the House did pass SB 157 today, but not without debate and not without amendment. Representative Johnny Floyd presented the bill that would require payday lenders to be licensed by the Georgia Industrial Loan Association, effectively ending the practice that he says creates a treadmill of debt.
The chief features of a payday loan are high interest, short term, and absent of installment payment so that borrowers can get out of it. They must pay another fee to roll these loans over. The loan for another 2 weeks costs highly.
Floyd also said payday loan companies located near military bases often prey on servicemen. Representative Earl Earhart argued that he had heard no such complaints, but Representative John Douglas, who is a former Armed Services commander, said he often received phone calls from unscrupulous lenders.
I sat on the local BRAC for the Dobbins Air Force Base, and not once did I ever hear anything about payday lending.
If the loan is legitimate, if their debt is legitimate, then I had no problem in the world with trying to help the agency that was calling to collect. But if they borrowed $200 and this person wanted them to pay back $400 or $500, I'm not going to be a part of that.
Now the bill passed 150 votes to 20, but 5 amendments were successful, including one co-sponsored by Floyd that excludes some tax refund advance businesses. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Thanks, Jesse. Well, also from the House today, schools could be required to report incidents of bullying to the State Department of Education, according to a bill that was passed there today. House Bill 1125 expands the legal definition of bullying to include elementary students, allows for anonymous reporting, and requires training for educators. Opponents of the measure argue that the bill duplicates current law, creates costs and paperwork for local systems, and is written too broadly. Education Chair Representative Bob Holmes, who sponsored these, actually responded to these claims, saying that the measure has broad bipartisan support. First, here's Representative Jerry Keene.
In addition to that, this would add the 10th reporting criteria to our local school systems to keep up with for these type of instances. But perhaps the thing that I'm most concerned about in this bill, if you'll look, is the definition of bullying there in Section A. It is a very broad definition. And then when you add to the fact in Section B that this will now cover K through 12. This means kids that are 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, who at times say things they don't mean, they don't understand.
One, there will be no cost to local school systems. The Georgia Emergency Management Agency does in fact provide this kind of training for free. We did in fact have communication with them, so contrary to the concerns that we have that it will be a costly measure, GEMA in fact does do this. Secondly, as it relates to the issue of the definition of what is bullying that one of the persons raised, I'm glad to say that this was a bipartisan measure that came out of the committee unanimously, and that the definition of bullying was actually provided by a Republican member of the committee, to which his colleagues and the Democrats agreed unanimously.
A move to table House Bill 1125 failed. A committee substitute to the measure passed by a vote of 118 to 52 and now goes to the Senate.
It's a test given to 3rd, 5th, and 8th graders that determines whether they are promoted to the next grade level. Today, the House Education Subcommittee discusses a bill that would delay the test given to 3rd graders. Lawmakers Chrissy Thrasher joins us live with more on House Bill 1310. Chrissy.
Well, Gerald, those supporting this legislation want to delay the Georgia Academic Placement and Promotion Policy Test for 3rd graders for 1 year. The subcommittee wants to amend House Bill 1310 by allowing 3rd graders to complete the test this year, but using the results as a diagnostic tool to address target weaknesses in students rather than retain those students who fail.
And schools will put in place their remediation plan that they already have made in preparation for this test. We'll remediate those students, test them a second time. They will provide this information on the number of students failing and passing to the board and the committee.
But some fear the results of the test may reveal that there are more at-risk students needing assistance than money in the school system's budget.
It's a very serious problem because of the early intervention programs and the way in which we fund them, or the way in which the governor has recommended that we not fund them in this 05 budget. The problem is that we have some kids who are moving from the 3rd grade to the 4th grade who don't know how to read. And there is no greater predictor of a child dropping out of school than going on to the 4th grade without reading skills.
And House Bill 1310 received a do-pass recommendation by the House Subcommittee. Reporting live, I'm Chrissy Thrasher for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Chrissy.
The Georgia Professional Standards Commission agreed today to allow college graduates to become teachers by passing a series of tests instead of returning to school. Responding to a teacher shortage throughout the state, the commission voted 11-2 to revise teacher certification standards. That change is slated to take effect in March. We're going to talk to the head of the Professional Standards Commission about what the changes mean to Georgia's K-12 classrooms on tomorrow's broadcast.
Meanwhile, University of Georgia President Michael Adams gave a presentation this afternoon before a joint meeting of the House and Senate Higher Education Committees. Adams provided an update on how UGA is managing its resources under current budget cuts and doing more with fewer state dollars. But he said the university and the state could suffer if cuts continue.
I would say to you that there is simply no such thing at the competitive level in which we play today as cheap excellence. The foundation of quality that has been built at UGA over the past 15 years is threatened by the continuation of these kinds of reductions. And if UGA suffers, the state of Georgia that we all care deeply about suffers as well.
During the presentation, Adams also noted the university continues to rank among the top public universities in the nation and that the average SAT score at UGA is 200 points above the national average.
Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor filed a bill today that would retain books and student fees in the Hope Scholarship. Taylor's legislation calls for freezing tuition at state colleges and universities for 3 years. It would also require a 3.0 grade point average for Hope recipients.
Also introduced today, Governor Sonny Perdue's Honesty in Government Act. The ethics legislation would give the State Ethics Commission more authority. Last year, ethics legislation backed by the governor and Lieutenant Governor Taylor did not clear the House.
Well, the Senate today passed a bill making female genital mutilation a crime. Senator Renee Unterman said the custom of what some call female circumcision has arrived in America with immigrants from some African and Middle Eastern countries.
The purpose of this legislation is to put that refugee communities, the different ones that still practice this custom, on notice that it will not be tolerated.
Senator Nadine Thomas, who sponsored a similar bill, said that younger girls are becoming victims of the practice, and she explained why.
But right now what is happening with FGM, the men now are performing these procedures on younger children, especially when these children are a few months old or soon after birth, because now women are rebelling saying, no, we're not going to have this procedure. So now it's the young children who are being attacked.
Senate Bill 418 passed without opposition and goes to the House. Well, today was the 24th annual Poor People's Day at the Capitol, a group who supports many movements but has one overall mission: to end poverty. David Zelski joined with them this morning at the Trinity United Methodist Church, 1 block from the Capitol.
Today was Action Day for the poor.
It is ignorance that causes people to keep people from being hungry. It is ignorance that keeps people from having a place to live.
Today, several organizations and community leaders rallied to voice their issues for the year.
1 in 15 adults in Georgia is under some form of correctional supervision. This is shameful.
After making their voices heard here at the church, the group marched onto the Capitol so legislators could hear their concerns.
Let people say what they want to say, when they want to say it, how they want to say it.
So often people are locked out of the political process and they don't want to participate because legislators are so disconnected and really don't understand the real issues of real people.
The coalition leaders also met with Governor Sonny Perdue to share their issues and say they'll be back next year to continue their fight. For Lawmakers, I'm David Zelski.
Meanwhile, Georgia's midwives and advanced practice registered nurses rallied at the Capitol on Wednesday for the right to write prescriptions. Lawmaker Samantha Cheshire has more on this story.
Georgia is the only state in the nation that does not allow advanced practice registered nurses, or APRNs, to write prescriptions. APRNs can call prescriptions into a pharmacist, but must have a doctor sign all written prescriptions.
Every time I see a patient, I have to then go to the physician, get a prescription signed, and return to the patient and hand the prescription. The physician has never seen the patient. And yet the physician's responsible for the prescription.
This lack of authority is frustrating to nurses because they say it causes unnecessary delays for their patients.
When a patient comes to see me and they can't get their prescription from me that day, then they have to jump through several hoops in order to get their prescription, either me calling it into a pharmacy or waiting until a physician is able to sign that prescription for them.
APRNs are supporting Senate Bill 376, which would provide them the right to write prescriptions.
Senate Bill 376 would allow advanced practice nurses in the state of Georgia to sign a prescription for their patient as long as they were in a collaborative practice agreement with a physician of their same specialty.
Senate Bill 376 is currently being considered in the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. I'm Samantha Cheshire for Lawmakers.
Well, there's a new place to turn for information about Georgia. The new Georgia Encyclopedia was unveiled at the Capitol today. Lawmakers Angelina Washington has more.
The new Georgia Encyclopedia makes its debut today at the Capitol.
It's the very first multimedia online encyclopedia, and so all Georgians should be very proud to have this tremendous resource at their hands.
The new Georgia Encyclopedia is an online source that provides information about Georgia's people, places, events, and much more.
Think of it as an authoritative and comprehensive reference about all things Georgia at your fingertips.
A partnership of the Georgia Humanities Council, the University of Georgia Press, the University System of Georgia, and the Governor's Office, this site offers more than 700 articles. The Governor explained that he was excited about this website.
I want Georgia to be known as a state that embraces technology and innovation. I think this is a great way to demonstrate this to the world.
The new Georgia Encyclopedia offers thousands of images such as written articles, audio, and movie clips. The encyclopedia was written for the general public and for middle and high school students. 8th grade students from Peachtree Charter Middle School said the new site is easy and helpful.
Thank you for allowing my classmates and I the opportunity to access your website.
Now Georgia history is only a click away and can be visited at www.georgiaencyclopedia.org and is updated weekly. I'm Angelina Washington for Lawmakers.
This morning, the creation of Georgia was celebrated at the Capitol. The proclamation of Georgia Day was hailed by none other than General James Oglethorpe. Chris Ober reports on the day's events.
On this day, 271 years ago, General James Oglethorpe founded Georgia. This momentous day was celebrated at the Capitol with reenactors and a presentation by Georgia Military College. Governor Perdue took part in the festivities, reminding those in attendance the principles in which Oglethorpe founded Georgia.
You know, on this day in 1733, 271 years ago, General James Oglethorpe and 100 settlers landed at Yamacraw Bluff, which is now near Savannah. They came to establish a new colony called Georgia, and they brought with them a motto that described the spirit of their endeavor. And that motto was, "Not for ourselves, but for others."
Governor Perdue proclaimed today as Georgia Day, and the celebration was capped off by the Georgia Military College drill team. The school has been a part of the Georgia Day celebration for many years.
Well, for about the past 20 or 25 years, Georgia Military College has been invited by the governor to essentially participate in and lead off the celebration of Georgia Day, which is a commemoration of the founding of Georgia by James Oglethorpe. So we're proud and pleased to be able to do that.
General Oglethorpe made an appearance in the House and Senate today to proclaim it to be Georgia Day. This is something all lawmakers can agree on. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Chris Ober.
Well, coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, Governor Perdue's child endangerment legislation is expected on the Senate floor. We'll have that story and all the latest from under the Gold Dome tomorrow at 7. Now stay tuned for Ask This Old House. That program is next right here on Georgia Public Broadcasting.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 16th day of the Georgia General Assembly. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Wandy Lawson. For everyone here at Lawmakers, good night.